Emer, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As Emer said, I'm the Labour Party spokesperson in the Senate on climate change, and I'm delighted to be here today. Sean Sherrick is our spokesperson on agriculture. He's asked me to contribute today on his behalf. He's been involved in the preparation of the speech. Obviously, any mistakes are mine, but he sends his apologies and he sends his best wishes for the success of the day. If you pick up any paper at all, it's clear that the agricultural sector is seen as the cause of, the victim of, and the potential solution to the whole issue of climate change. And that's all at the same time. So it's central to any debate on climate change. The agricultural sector and the goods it produces form the backbone of the global food supply. And the sector has evolved to the point where it's more or less efficient, and apart from some very distressing exceptions, it manages to produce sufficient levels of food for the majority of the world's population. So the impact on agriculture of any changes or initiatives to counter climate change have to be very well thought out, and their impact needs to be carefully considered before they're implemented. We all accept that agriculture is a major consumer of fuel supplies, and we accept that it's a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. So our challenge is how to minimise that fuel consumption and how to minimise those emissions. They say necessity is the mother of all inventions. Well, for us, there's some key questions that we need to address, such as how do we make it more economically beneficial for the agricultural sector to become more energy efficient? How can we encourage more innovation so that we get lower emissions of greenhouse gases such as methane? How can we encourage more afforestation so that we can soak up some of the carbon dioxide produced by agriculture? And how can we encourage the use of more fuel-efficient fuels, such as perhaps using some biofuels? And we believe that we can only address these issues when lawmakers, people involved in the climate change movement, scientists, come together and work with the agricultural community to come up with solutions to these challenges. If we take the issue of methane, we believe that it's crude and regressive to simply blame the agricultural sector for its production and to call for limits in the level of production of methane. The first result would just be a reduction in the amount of milk produced, the amount of meat products produced, and at the end of the day what would result is we just see more importation of goods to fill the gap in the market. It would lead to a failing agricultural sector, and it would lead to a failing of the Irish economy. We don't see that as the answer. We think we need to look for other solutions. We believe that bodies such as the Agricultural Department in University College Dublin, in Maynooth, the Agricultural School in Warrenstown, County Meath, can be at the forefront of discovery when it comes to efficiency in agriculture. Our aim is for Ireland's institutions to lead in Europe in the area of agricultural training, research and development. Methane gets a very bad press as a major contributor to global gas emissions, but yet it could become a utility if we manage to harness it properly. It's not a simple thing to do, and it might sound strange, but it's not impossible to deal with methane at the point of use, because methane, when burnt, turns into carbon dioxide, and with proper plans for afforestation locally, the impact of that gas can be dealt with. So not only do we get lower emissions, but we get a local fuel source for farmers to use. Research is needed to develop a technology to do this, and we believe that Ireland should be at the vanguard of that research, and we believe that the government needs to put resources in place to make sure that technical innovations like that become reality. So we think that scientific research can help us out of this quagmire. And we think things like afforestation can also help. Since the reform of the Common Agricultural Policy in 1992, there have been an additional 500,000 hectares of land given over to forests in Europe, and that number of forests continues to grow. Now, that not only has that got an enormous impact and benefit in terms of offsetting our carbon emissions, but it's also creating new habitats for an array of wildlife. So a question we pose to the agricultural community is, are we doing enough to encourage afforestation? Should we look again at the incentives that are in place to encourage the agricultural community to plant more trees, to manage more forests? And we'd be interested to hear their views on that. And we certainly need to look at the whole area of fuel supply. We're in the period of peak oil at the moment. on a daily basis, the demands for additional fuel sources increase, and at the same time we've got a diminishing level of fossil fuels out there to meet that demand. So as a result, alternative types of fuel are being considered. We heard from Liz that there are great plans out there for the use of renewable energy sources. And in agriculture, there's a lot of debate at the moment about the potential offered by biofuels. Now, biofuels are hailed by some, but they're also criticised by others. On the one hand, it's claimed that they're carbon neutral. The carbon that's generated in their combustion is more than offset by the amount of carbon dioxide consumed during the growth process. But others claim that the carbon dioxide emitted in the harvest, refinement and transportation of the fuels actually makes the equation a lot less favourable. Well, on the assumption that the equation is favourable, then the big question is, should the agricultural sector become a means of production of food, or should it be a means of production of fuel, or should it be a mixture of both? I've heard estimates of the amount of land that would need to be put aside if we were to get all of our energy sources in Ireland from biofuels. I think the figure of a third of the land mass of this island would need to be put aside if we decided just to go down the route of supplying all of our energy from biofuels. Now, of course, nobody is seriously suggesting such levels of production. I just use that as an illustration of the fundamental change that will come to the landscape of this country if we start bringing in a significant level of biofuels production. So I think it's a very important issue to bear in mind. And of course, significant productions of biofuels could also have the potential to distort local food markets. So an issue for us would be how we ensure local food sustainability on the back of any significant investment in biofuels. Because obviously the more land dedicated to fuel crops means the less land available for food production. So biofuels, we have to adopt a certain degree of caution. They are an alternative to fossil fuels, and they can help to reduce the amount of greenhouse gas produced. But not all biofuels are created equally. Different crops have different yields and have different impacts. And we need to understand those differences before we rush headlong into the headlights on the issue. So it's our contention that further study and vigorous research is needed in this area, and that a precautionary principle is required. Research can help us to counter the negative impacts of methane, and it can help us to further identify whether more incentives are needed to encourage afforestation. And of course, research can help to identify the optimal use of biofuels in Ireland. We believe that combating climate change can only be brought about by adopting a policy mix involving transport, energy policy, planning and agriculture. We think we need to put agriculture at the centre of that policy mix. But we must proceed with caution. And we can only proceed by involving lawmakers, members of the climate change movement, as well as members of the agricultural community. Thank you very much.